Good evening. We had intended to speak at the top of this program with one of two BuzzFeed reporters behind a report that, if true, meant that federal investigators had evidence that the President of the United States committed a serious crime and potentially an impeachable offense. CNN had not independently confirmed the story, nor had any other news organization. And just a few moments ago, we learned that BuzzFeed was going to pull their reporter from the program because Robert Mueller's office was about to weigh in. Well, that office has weighed in, and it is something in itself. Before getting into exactly what Mueller's office has now said, and they rarely ever say anything on the record, here's the essence of what the BuzzFeed report was. The headline read, President Trump directed his attorney, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about the Moscow Tower project. Earlier today, neither the president nor the White House categorically denied the substance of it. By this afternoon, though, that line had changed. Rudy Giuliani, the president's TV lawyer, calling the report categorically false. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders echoed that line.
Did the president direct Michael Cohen to lie to Congress?
Look, that's absolutely ridiculous. I think that the president's outside counsel addressed this best and said in a statement earlier today that's categorically false.
Well, now, in a very rare move, the special counsel's office has weighed in. CNN's Sarah Murray joins us now with that and all the other late developments. So what did the special counsel's office say? And this just happened.
It did just happen, Anderson. And as you pointed out, it's remarkable that they issued a statement like this. But here's what it says from Peter Carr, the spokesman for the special counsel. BuzzFeed's description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. And remember, Anderson, this story, it's sourced to, federal law enforcement officials, but it also said that there were all of these documents, that there were interviews, that there were witnesses. And that is really what backed up this notion that the president had tried to get Michael Cohen to testify to something that just wasn't true in front of Congress. And now the special counsel is pretty unequivocally saying, we have documents and witness statements, but they don't back up what BuzzFeed is saying in the story.
And there were two reporters on the BuzzFeed story. We were supposed to talk to one of them. They said that they had two sources on the records, unnamed sources in federal law enforcement, who I believe they claimed that they had seen some of these documents.
Yeah, that's right. I think they said their sources had reviewed some of these documents, but the BuzzFeed reporters had not personally reviewed them. And Anderson, this is a story that's kind of stumped a lot of us during the day and into late last night because no one else has been able to confirm this story. No one else was able to get their hands on any of these documents that apparently backed up this story. And I think the same, is true of the BuzzFeed reporters. They didn't put anything else further out corroborating it in terms of the underlying evidence. But I think this statement really shows you what a difficult position the special counsel's office was in today. We know the Justice Department, that includes the special counsel's office, does not like to comment on anything, regarding an ongoing investigation. That's what got James Comey into so much trouble when he was leading the FBI. But in the wake of this BuzzFeed story, we saw so many lawmakers, Democratic lawmakers, going out there today and saying, we need to know if this is true or not. If this is true, we need to see these underlying documents because the president instructing someone to lie to Congress, the president obstructing justice, is grounds for impeachment. And I think that this sort of drumbeat we saw from lawmakers is part of what put pressure on the special counsel to do something so extraordinary. I mean, as you pointed out, they almost never comment. Last year, they wouldn't even tell the New York Times what one of their prosecutors was having for lunch around the Manafort trial. That's how little they want to comment on these things.
Yeah, Sarah Murray, appreciate it. I want to go next to the White House. CNN's Pamela Brown. Pam, you heard Sarah Sanders categorically deny the report this afternoon, quoting Rudy Giuliani. Has there been any reaction since the special counsel's office weighed in?
Not publicly, but I think it's safe to say that the president will likely tweet about this very soon, Anderson, because this is vindication from what White House officials have been saying throughout the day here since early this morning, that they have been saying that this is false. Initially, you heard some of the White House officials come out and attack the credibility of BuzzFeed, attack the idea of leaking from law enforcement officials. And then as the day went on, Sarah Sanders, as you point out, the press secretary, then came out and said it's categorically false. Rudy Giuliani, the president's attorney, said the same thing. She was echoing the sentiment from what we heard from Rudy Giuliani. And so now, in an extraordinary move, Anderson, the special counsel spokesman, Peter Carr, is coming out and essentially saying that there is nothing to back up this BuzzFeed report that the president directed Michael Cohen, his former attorney, to lie to Congress, and that there are Trump Organization documents to back it up. Again, as Sarah pointed out, That is extremely rare for the special counsel to do it. But also, this story from BuzzFeed certainly caught a lot of attention because of the implications for possible impeachment, as Sarah pointed out, subordinating perjury. That's what this raised. You heard lawmakers on Capitol Hill talking about this, saying that they want to get down to the bottom of this. They want to investigate. During all of this, there was a strong pushback from here at the White House from officials saying that it's not true. And now you have the special counsel statement. I'm sure this is, even though right now no one is speaking out publicly here at the White House in response to the special counsel statement, I think, again, it will be safe to say that the president will be talking about this. His son, Don Jr., just tweeted about it, basically mocking the BuzzFeed story, saying, "I told you so." So there's probably going to be more to come in terms of reaction, Anderson.
Yeah, Pamela Brown, I appreciate your reporting. BuzzFeed, by the way, just responded. I'm quoting from them. "We are continuing to report and determine what the special counsel is disputing. We remain confident in the accuracy of our report," they say. Joining us now is New York Times White House correspondent and CNN political analyst Maggie Haberman, also CNN legal analyst Preet Bharara, and Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey's a former federal prosecutor. Preet's the former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, who mentioned that President Trump fired him, making his loss our gain. Maggie, just what do you make of this?
A lot of different things,
Yeah.
right? And it's still hard to figure it out. One thing that Pam Brown said that I don't think is true is that the statement did not say there is nothing to this.
Right.
The statement said it's inaccurate, and we don't actually know exactly what they're saying is inaccurate. That said,
right, they're being very specific in what they say.
Right.
BuzzFeed's description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's testimony are not accurate.
right. So this story would have, if true, would have directionally changed what is happening in terms of this White House. You saw the pressure come out from lawmakers who were deeply concerned about it, not just Democrats, but also Republicans. And you saw that pressure applied and grow on the special counsel throughout the day. It is very rare that they issue any statement at all, let alone something of this nature. It probably would have been more helpful had they done it earlier today, but I don't think they felt that they could.
It's also interesting that President Trump, who obviously tweets quite a bit and attacks things, had said nothing about this all day. He wasn't saying
Right.
this is not true.
So it's interesting. There was silence from the White House, or we're not going to get into it, as you saw Hogan Gidley do, and I think
Right.
that Sarah Sanders did the same thing earlier on today.
Kellyanne Conway was on.
Right, and there were a bunch of officials were not talking about, we're not going to get into this. You know, the reality is that the president is not known for making truthful statements to his own folks. So I think that nobody necessarily wanted to go out on a limb. And what was striking about this was Rudy Giuliani did then issue, the president's personal lawyer, a categorical denial, and then Sarah Sanders went with that later. And so I think that was when you did start to see something change here. Look, the president is very likely to point to this and say, this is an example, witch hunt, you know, no collusion. This is an example of what they do. The interesting thing about the Mueller report is that depending on whether it is ever made public, there is going to be an answer to this, right? We're going to know at some point whether it's in the full report or a summary, not exactly, but what was found. This was a knowable thing. The two reporters involved in this have broken consistently very good stories about this issue, about the Trump Tower project in Moscow, for instance. And so I think that lent a lot of credibility to this. I am curious to see what else evolves, but I do think that you can expect the president is going to point to this as an example of a voracious media,
Right.
and I think that it is understandable that he would do that.
Right.
If I could just add one point to what Maggie said, we may know February 7th what substance there is to this story, because Michael Cohen is going to be testifying in public on February 7th, and he will undoubtedly be asked about this.
They've already suggested there are restrictions on what he can say on February 7th.
That's
so.
right, but it's not clear what those restrictions are, and it's
Right.
not clear if this is covered. Like, for example,
But if he can't, I mean, if he decides, or whoever decides that he can't speak about anything relating to Mueller or the Southern District of New York, that would seem to eliminate this.
The restriction that I understand that Cohen is going to be under is that he can't talk about the Russia part of the story. This is sort of a weird hybrid, this story of obstruction of justice and Russia. It's also possible that if the whole thing is false, he will take the opportunity to say that.
Right.
And I don't see how that compromises.
Which, by the way,
anything.
we should also point out, he did not comment about the story today, nor did people around him publicly make any comments about it.
Although Lanny Davis did not, who has been acting as a spokesman
Right.
for Michael Cohen, did not knock it down. He did it out of respect for the special counsel's office. We just can't talk about this. Which
I should point out, you were very, I don't know if circumspect is the right word, but very cautious when this story broke, tweeting out, if this is true, it's very damning, but let's reserve judgment.
Yeah, look, I think this is an object lesson for people who have been covering the story and responding to the story, whether you're in the press or in politics or you're just a citizen in the country. Sometimes you need to pause and decide whether there are enough facts to support your jubilation because you don't like the president or your disappointment because you support the president.